Okay, I'm going to wade into one of the great debates in the card making industry. Is August too early to start making Christmas cards? I love making Christmas cards all year long. Christmas cards are some of the happiest cards to make, and by doing it now, I'll have less pressure in October and November. But I know not everyone feels the same way. Let me know in the comments below when you start making your Christmas cards. Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and today I'm sharing 4 Christmas cards I made with one Pinkfresh Studio cover plate that isn't even really a Christmas product at all. So if you do think it's too early, you can just pretend that these are not Christmas cards. Here's the cover plate. It's called Ornate Floral, but I think these big flowers look like poinsettias. My first 2 cards are going to show 2 different ways to use the inlaid die cut technique, so when I cut the die from white cardstock, I need a way to keep track of all the pieces. I know that putting a dryer sheet between the cardstock and the cutting plate can grab even the smallest little pieces and hold them in place, but my dryer sheets were all the way downstairs in the laundry room. I did, however, have these Swiffer cloths in my closet, and I wondered if they would work in a similar way. So I stacked up my sandwich and I ran it through my Gemini Junior, and sure enough, it worked great. I popped out all the pieces and they pretty much stayed in place on the Swiffer cloth, so I'm ready for the next step. Earlier, I had cut another panel with the cover plate without the Swiffer, and those pieces are all over the place, but I'll use that outline for this card rather than trying to lift the frame from the Swiffer cloth. I used some big wide double-sided tape on a piece of computer paper trimmed to an A2 card size so that the frame plus all my inlaid pieces will have a sticky place to land. I like this method better than putting liquid glue on the back of everything, but of course you can do what you feel most comfortable with. And honestly, this tape can be too sticky and unforgiving, so for the next card I'll show you a method I like even more. This first card is going to be quite a simple inlaid technique. I'm going to color the petals of the flowers red like poinsettias and leave everything else white. To color the petals, I got out my Catherine Pooler Samba ink. This is a really bright, happy red, and it'll give great contrast with the white. I'm putting each petal face down into the ink and pressing down with my craft pick. When I want to lift it up, I press down on one end of the die cut, and that pushes the other end up so I can pick it up. This can be a messy process though. Even though I'm using tools here, I ended up with inky fingers, and you know what that means. It means I got up and I washed my hands before I moved on to the next part. Remember, I want the rest of my card to be clean, clear white, and there's no place for red smudges. When I had all the petals colored red, I gave them a light spritz of Avery Elle Shimmer spray. And while they dried, I peeled back the Swiffer cloth from the rest of the die cut, and I positioned it over the top of my sticky panel. Then I simply used a craft pick to push the pieces through into their spots. This is a really easy way to inlay your die cuts, and it means you're not trying to figure out which piece goes where. I've saved that for the next card, but you'll see there's a good reason for it. There are a couple of white pieces that had fallen out, so I did have to find their spots, but for the most part I would say that the Swiffer cloth did its job in helping me to keep track of everything. Then it was time to inlay the red pieces. This went pretty quickly since most of them are big and very easy to differentiate and tell apart. When I had everything laid into place, I got out a large square die to trim down the panel to fit on my favorite 4¼ inch square card format. I realized I needed to have a couple more red pieces, so out came the Samba ink again, and then the shimmer spray, and then of course another trip to the sink so my fingers were clean. Now back to that square die. I lined it up and I could see it was a tight fit. I wanted my panel to be as large as possible, but since I was trimming down to a square, I needed to have the frame portion of the die cut trimmed off. This die fit perfectly, but there was no room to be making a mistake at this point, so I grabbed a long piece of purple tape and put it along the one side before running it through my Gemini Junior. Here's the panel, and I gave it a quick turn based on where I'm thinking I'll put my sentiment, which is kind of in that lower right quadrant. To make stacking my sentiment die cut quick, I doubled up some white cardstock before I ran it through my die cutting machine. I did this a couple of times, and that gave me 4 layers of white cardstock, and I also cut the word once from silver glitter cardstock. Then I used liquid glue to put them all together, as well as gluing it onto my poinsettia panel. To finish the card, I just put it onto a white card base. I love this classic color combination for Christmas. White, red, and some sparkly silver. It just doesn't get more festive than this. My next card is a stepped-up variation on the first one. This time I want to create the look of stained glass, warm glow included. So I started by cutting the frame from Concord and 9th graphite mirror cardstock. This isn't silver, but it's also not black. I think it works really well and adds to the stained glass look I'm trying to achieve. This time, every single piece of the die cut is going to need to be colored, so I started by finding all the pieces I wanted to color red. This time I knew how far down the panel I needed to go to be sure that I had everything for my square panel, and I used the frame to help me make sure that I had all the pieces. Then I put a strip of temporary adhesive down on my pad of newsprint, and I laid all my red areas down. Now here's the key to getting the glow in your stained glass panel. Start by laying down a layer of yellow ink. I'm using Tiara here and a sponge dauber, and I'm just getting color down. No worries about making a nice blend. Once it was down, I got out the Samba ink again and I went around all the edges of the petals, leaving a yellow highlight in the center. This yellow highlight is what's going to make them look like a window. I added some rouge ink, which is a deeper red, just on the ends of each petal to add to the contrast and to try and keep the petals looking red with a glow rather than just orange, if you know what I mean. This time, instead of using that double-sided tape, I used tape runner on my computer paper backer. As I said earlier, this method is much more forgiving if you happen to get the wrong piece in the wrong place, or the right piece in the right place, but not in the right way. Once I had that shiny frame in place, I started inlaying the petals again. So far, everything's the same as the first card, except for that change in color on the outline frame and the method of coloring the petals. But here's where it changed. Because to really get the stained glass look, every piece needs to have that glow. I'm working on the leaves now, and this time I'm using lemongrass as my lighter color to give the glow, and then eucalyptus on the outside. These leaf pieces are quite a bit smaller than the petals, so there's more glow and less green, if you know what I mean. But it's really the same process, and it goes pretty quickly. Next, it's time to do the rest of the background. I gathered up all the pieces, and this time there's quite a number of really tiny pieces. I still need that glow, so this time I'm using Tiara in the center, same as the petals, but then a darker yellow, Sauna, around the edges. I'll just show you a couple of the larger pieces so you can see what I mean. For the smaller pieces, they were too small to really have two colors on them, so I just went with the lighter yellow and I put them in place. And of course, I lost one tiny piece. I looked everywhere, and I even considered recutting that portion of the die, but I finally just added in the graphite piece. Once again, I used the square die to trim down the panel to the size of my card front. This time I stacked up 4 black die cuts for my sentiment, and I topped it with 1 cut from graphite cardstock. I played with the card base a bit. I tried white and I tried black, but really the best thing to do was create a frame of the same graphite cardstock. So I did that. I cut a 4 1/4 inch square of it, and then I used a smaller square die to cut a hole in the middle, which I can use on another project. I attached the frame to the white card base, and then I put some foam tape in the center, directly onto the white portion. This will ensure that my stained glass panel is popped up, but it still sits perfectly level over the frame. So I think there are 2 keys to getting this stained glass look. First, the darker frame. If you don't have this graphite mirror card, black or dark gray or even dark brown can give you a similar effect. Second, the glow created by the ink blending on all the inlaid pieces, especially the background pieces that normally you might ignore and leave flat. Here are the 2 cards. These are the ones that I really set out to make for this video, and I think they really showed very different looks you can get with the same die and the same inlaid die cutting technique. But I had 1 white frame left over, and you know I couldn't just leave that alone. I used it as a stencil and I blended ink through it. The same colors. I used Tiara in the center of the flowers, Samba on the petals, and eucalyptus on the leaves and background. And while the stencil was still in place, I spritzed it with the Avery Elle Shimmer spray. Oh man, this stuff is magic on Catherine's inks. It gives such a pretty shimmer, and it softens the colors and gives almost a velvety texture. And then, of course, I had the stencil left over, and I decided to create some drama by putting black behind it. Trust me, when you do this, people are going to be asking how you got this look, and it's so easy. This time I added the shadow layer to the sentiment after I blended Tiara and Samba ink on it, and I also blended them onto the card base. White would have been too stark a contrast, I think, and this adds more festive shimmer, which is always perfect at Christmas. There you go, 4 cards without even really trying, from 1 die cut and 2 techniques. And if it's too early for you to start on Christmas cards, it's easy to de-Christmasize these designs by simply changing the colors and sentiments to something more summery, or autumny, or springy. Hey, This one will work all year long, and you can't get much more out of your supplies than that. If getting more out of your supplies is something you enjoy doing, I've linked a couple of videos here that will show you more ways to do that. Supplies that I used are listed below. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.